all of you for getting a chance to be here. We've got a lot to be able to cover with this, to be able to help not only resolve things for the future, but also to be able to unpack fully what has happened in the past. Mr. Esser, there are several comments that you made on it. What is the most pressing issue that you've discovered in just the flash report that you have done based on the vulnerabilities that still exist and what needs to be finished? I'm not asking you to expose publicly vulnerabilities that still exist. I'm asking you, I guess, what on the list, how many things still need to be addressed immediately?
Senator, I think one of the most important things that needs to be addressed is the two-factor authentication to access systems. This has been a long-standing problem at OPM. They have made improvements. They have implemented this to affect workstation access, but the actual systems that are being used by employees need to be also implemented and require two-factor authentication.
I saw from your report, and quite frankly, the Chief Information Officer also had listed the same thing in 2012. Let me just read this real quickly. The initiative to require personal identity verification credential authentication to access the agency's network. As of the end of 2014, 95% of OPM workstations required personal identity verification access for the network. However, none of the agency's 47 major applications require personal identity verification authentication. Is that still correct?
To the best of our knowledge, it still is.
Ms. Archuleta, tell me about that and just the process of transition.
Yes. Two points there on the multi-factor authentication for remote users. We are 100% at that point now. As with regard to all other users, we're working very rapidly to increase that. I've asked my CIO to increase that effort, and I would be, I'm sorry I don't have the percentages in my mind right now, but I'd be glad to get back to you where we stand as of this date. But I do know that we're working rapidly to do that.
Okay, so a 95% figure you think is pretty close as far as the workstations, saying 100% for those that are working remote, 95% workstations, but it's still these 47 major applications that still are exposed, I guess, at that point.
I would like to get back to you, Senator, on that to give you the full details on it.
Then there's a question on the issue of security assessment and authorization. Of that, obviously, that is a requirement from OMB. This ongoing issue of this 47 different groups that are here, it says on this, 11 of them were not completed in time or operating without a valid authorization. What can you tell me about that?
I can tell you that all but one of those systems has been authorized. They're operating with authorization, and we're working on the final one that was with the contractor.
Okay, there's also a systemic problem there, obviously, of trying to find out why they weren't already through the authorization issues. So to make sure that authorization is done on time and is on schedule, has that issue been fixed? I know rapidly people stepped in and said, okay, let's try to fix this, but the authorizations haven't been done. What about the process for the future to make sure that those continue to be done on time?
I'd like to have my CIO get that information so I could give it back to you, sir.
Okay, I'll be glad to be able to have that. Give me a time frame on when I can get that back.
By the end of the week, sir.
Be great. There's also an outstanding letter that I sent to your office June the 10th. I'm the chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security Governmental Affairs that has the federal workforce in it, as you and I have discussed in the past.
Yes.
June the 10th, I sent a letter that's yet to be acknowledged from your staff that they have received that letter, much less to be answered to it. And there were some very basic questions that are still unanswered on it. None of them that would require a classified setting. But there's some basic responsive answers. I have letters that are already on the record from FAA, for instance, and a tremendous number of employees that live in my district that have asked just some very basic questions. The folks from AFGE have asked some very basic questions to get a response from. They've yet to get a response even to say it's been acknowledged. They just want to know some timing. And I know the letters have gone out nationwide, but people want to know that there's actually someone working on some of these other issues because there'll be many for a while.
Senator, I apologize to you if you've not received that response. I know that I've asked my staff to respond to that, and I know that it is forthcoming, but I will make sure that you have that letter today.
Be great. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about cost issues dealing with the appropriation side. Do we have a ballpark cost to OPM yet to contact the letter that's gone out to contact everyone to let them know, hey, you possibly your information has been breached. So there's really two cost factors that are sitting out here that our committee has to consider. One is the cost of distributing that letter out to all those individuals. The second one is the cost then for the credit report, credit screening, and protection that's happening to all those. That has been extended. Do you have a cost estimate for those two?
I have a general cost as we take a look at the take-up rate on the credit monitoring and the on the credit monitoring. That will adjust it, but it's approximately anywhere between 19 to 21 million.
Okay, so 19 to 21 million. And then what's the estimated cost on just the letter going out? Because that's not a cheap thing.
I don't know how to, that's the total cost, sir, between emails and letters.
Okay.
So I don't have the breakdown. I'd be glad to get that for you.
And are you aware that some agencies have actually, the website that you link people to sell, say, get more information, some agencies have already blocked that internally. So those individuals, when they try to go, are blocked from that for fear that there may be phishing scams that are going on. So have you started working with other agencies on that?
Yes, we've worked closely with departments and agencies because of some security protocols they might have. So we've worked closely with them and their CIOs and other top officials.
Finally, this issue of the inventory of servers and databases and different workstations that are out there. The central control issue is important, obviously, for keeping up security and technology upgrades and making sure softwares continue to be upgraded and everyone has a consistent security presence there. When there's any server independent there, it creates tremendous vulnerabilities. They just have to find one of those. How's that going with unifying that structure? Because that's not a legacy issue. That's more just an inventory issue.
Yes, I respect the Inspector General's opinion on this, but my CIO has told me that we have indeed an inventory of systems and data, and I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss this with you and with him further.
Great. We'll look forward to getting that report and getting a chance to find out more about that, because that's one of those significant vulnerabilities.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you a follow-up question. You said, coming from the CIO Council before, that many federal agencies have similar issues.
Yes.
So what I'd like is a twofold question. One is to define what issues mean on this, and then the second one is give me a percentage when you say many other agencies. And again, I'm not asking you to articulate what are the security issues and specifically where are our vulnerabilities.
Right.
Not asking you to do that. Give me a guess here of how many agencies that we're dealing with and what those issues are.
I would say many of the federal agencies and it's have a similar kind of problem that Mr. Esser alluded to about decentralization of IT, and in and of itself not necessarily a bad thing, but it's been very, very difficult for many of these agencies if they've rolled out systems and then have to support these systems. The complexity factors have grown so significantly that it's just very, very difficult for them to get their arms around systems. I mean, we would do at DHS, to call out DHS specifically, I mean, we would do inventories and try to, if you will, find all the systems that we had, right? And I think we did a relatively good job at that, but it would not be, but every year we would find more. Well, try to secure that. And I say that's the first thing, is that most agencies, I believe, have that problem. When I talk to, and I don't want to put a percentage on it because I don't know how to measure that as far as a percentage, but I would say most of the major agencies have this problem that the CIO would not be able to sit here and say they have a good handle on their true inventory of IT systems.
What about use of credentials?
And I would, well, I give all the world in the credit to DOD for having rolled out that CAT card years ago and having the leadership and wherewithal to make that happen. Most government agencies are still struggling to roll out what we call the HSPD 12 program, or the PIV card, right, the smart card, and then to use it for logical network access control. And it's still an issue. If you go to the CAP goals and you look at where we're at, it's still an issue at most of the agencies on the civilian side.
Authorizations? Different networks?
Yeah, again, I think you're hitting the hot spots here. The many systems we would find, we would either have, they wouldn't have authorizations because they were out in the field and they were not under the CIO's control. Or what I also didn't like, which was kind of hiding the ball a little bit here, is you could do an interim authority to operate, right? And some of those would last way too long, and that you wouldn't be, if you will, there'd be weaknesses in the systems, and it would be very difficult to clear those weaknesses. So again, I can't put numbers on that, sir, but hopefully I've given you a sense. where I feel many of the agencies sit today.
Okay, so my question with that related to appropriations. None of those seem like big dollar items. Those are more management of current inventory structure, process, the wonderful term hygiene, really for our systems. Am I hitting that wrong or right?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be a little careful here.
I mean, we do have legacy systems. I mean, if we've got to monitor a CRT with an orange screen on it, I get it. We have some old systems out there.
Right.
But I'm asking the initial security side of this seems to be the first rung. Seems to be how we're handling the information in the inventory.
I would agree with your sentiment that says we could manage this a lot more effectively, and we don't necessarily need new dollars to do that. Some of the issues, though, that go to true modernization, you do need it. You do need investment.
Sure.
Okay.
Ms. Archuleta, let me ask you a question. You had in your written testimony, then again in your oral testimony as well, you kind of talked through the timeline of how things went. Some areas you were very specific of how things moved and in what order. There were a couple terms that jumped out to me there. And let me just read this back to you. It says, as a result of these efforts to improve our security posture, in April 2015, an intrusion that predated the adoption of these security controls affecting OPM's IT systems and data was detected by our new cybersecurity tools. OPM immediately contacted the Department of Homeland Security and Federal Bureau of Investigation. Can you give me a definition of immediately? Is that same day, a week, a month?
The same day.
Same day, great. And then you had the same issue there. We talked about the scope and impact of the intrusion. Shortly thereafter, OPM notified congressional leadership. What's our time frame?
We have a 7-day requirement in which we met.
Okay, so met it within that 7 days.
Yes.
Terrific, thank you. The contractor that was involved in this, that had the responsibility for strategic IT and the security plan, who was that contractor, and what were the assurances that they gave early on during the conversation, the contracting process, to say we'll provide security structure, management? Well, I'm kind of looking for what they said they would do and what they actually did. So who was the contractor
yes,
first?
I think I want to be very clear that while the adversary leveraged a compromised key point user credential to gain access to OPM's network, we don't have any evidence that would suggest that Keypoint as a company was responsible or directly involved in the intrusion. We have not identified a pattern or material deficiency that resulted in the compromise of the credentials. And since last year, we have been working with Keypoint, and they have taken strides in securing its network and have been proactive in meeting the additional security controls that we have asked them to use to protect all of the background data.
So the question is then, with Keypoint, the security controls they put in now, were these security controls that were discussed earlier that were just not fulfilled, or these are things that weren't considered?
Yeah, we're discussing, I think, two different, I think I understand, but let me be sure, is that our detection in April detected an intrusion into our system in late 2014. Well, the detection was in 2015. We detected an intrusion into our system in late 2014.
So what I'm trying to drive at is, then there were changes in security protocol. Were those changes recommended before, or are these entirely new?
These are ones that we had planned and were installing as we progressed through our improvements. And unfortunately, we didn't have them in place soon enough. We are working, as I said, with a legacy system. We were testing many of our security tools, and as a result of actually being able to install this particular security tool, we were able to detect it.
Right, and that plan had been in place how long to be able to put those security controls?
It's part of our IT security plan, which we developed
Is that the 2012 plan that was developed?
It's 2014.
14, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.